screen?
No, it was coming out.
No, I was fine with it. Come on, really. Go back to what you had. That's good.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning. I think it's 10 o'clock, and I think the traffic and all that stuff, people are still coming from outside. So if you could please take your seat. The table number is printed on your name tag. Good morning. I think it's past 10 o'clock, so we should get started. We have a packed agenda, so let me take this opportunity to welcome you all this morning. I am Atam Dhawan, Senior Vice Provost for Research, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you. This is the first of the three National Academy of Inventors chapter at NJIT workshop on sustainable societies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just a friendly reminder first that NJIT requires all faculty, staff, and students to be fully vaccinated and to be in compliance with CDC and state guidelines for wearing the face masking or the face covering for the indoor meetings. So thank you for being in compliance. We will get started, and I will introduce the program a little bit in a few moments. But let me first take this opportunity. This is my great honor and pleasure to introduce our president of the NJIT, Dr. Joel Bloom, to give you welcome remarks.
First of all, good morning and welcome to Monday at NJIT. So Monday at NJIT, let's see, about 7:30 this morning, some of us were at Shabazz High School talking about makerspace that they're developing there. I only tell you that because it represents not only the commitment of NJIT to long days, some of my colleagues here know that, but to working in our community as well. So welcome to NJIT and the 2021 NJIT Faculty Research Showcase. And the Research Showcase is emblematic of NJIT these days. It's been on a growth trajectory. Our university is that growth university where when we opened the enrollment this past fall, 11,901 students, which is our largest enrollment here ever. And just to give you a little sense of how things are going in the enrollment entity of most colleges and universities, they're on the decline, and yet because of a whole host of reasons, everything from birth rates to immigration policies, but here at NJIT for our freshman class, we had over 11,000 applications for 1,400 seats. And for those who get an opportunity to speak to their local legislators every now and then, we could probably enroll more students if we had more capacity for the critically important STEM field, STEM professions that we are preparing students for. We've also, over the last almost decade, added 170 faculty with the help of many of the folks here in this room. Critically important to being a STEM research university. We've added 1 million square feet to our campus, a little over $500 million in doing that, as well as created about 90 or renovated 90 research labs here. If we are hiring faculty, we want to give them the opportunity to teach increased numbers of enrolled students and to make use of first-class research facilities. That's representative of some of the outcomes for this university. You may have read recently we're a top 50 of the public universities. I think what's interesting about being in that top 50, there are a little over 250 public universities educating 70% of the students in this country. So the vast majority of young men and women come to our colleges and universities that are public. And the public universities, including this one, often educate among those students who are of the lowest income. Here at NJIT, 40% of our students, for those who are familiar with federal Pell, receive or are eligible for federal Pell grants. Most importantly, knowing where the income levels of our students are, recognize the fact that 10 years out, 10 years of employment after this university education, they're among the highest income earners in the nation. So they start here with family income in the lowest quintiles, and then 10 years out, they're in the upper quintiles of earnings. It's transformative for them and clearly their families. What we're particularly proud of, though, in the state of New Jersey, among all of the public universities that are educating engineers, NJIT educates 62% of the African American engineers on an annual basis here in the state of New Jersey for the state workforce, 62%. And the last data point, in case you don't remember all of them, I'll leave you with the $2.8 billion economic impact this university has on the state economy. Some of it's the research, which you'll be hearing a lot more about. Some of it's just the number of students, 100,000 hours of public service. Some of it is obviously the outcome of the industry relationships we have with our research. So we are an R1. There are only 3 R1s, research ones. The elite research universities in the nation, there are 3 of them here in the state. We're one of them. The other 2 are Rutgers and Ivy League, Princeton. Princeton, yes, they're an R1 too. So 3 R1s. R1 brings a lot of money to the state of New Jersey, and particularly when we do partner with business and industry. So if you think about, there's only, I think 130 R1s in the nation of the 131. Oh, aren't we 30? We're the one, right? That's what I thought. 131 R1s. Thank you, Atom. And let me make a couple quick comments about Atom Dewan, who, as you know, heads the research effort here, and some of the faculty, many of the faculty who are here in the audience. They work today like a very finely honed machine. In getting grants, recruiting PhD students, recruiting outstanding faculty, and then making sure that that results, those faculty research results, have practical application. I can't help it, but it's always dangerous to do this. But in front of me, if we think about clean water, Professor Bufadel, and if you've probably read, Newark has had outstanding outcome in the lead pipe issue, which was projected to take 10 years, not only in this city, but many other cities around the nation. It's done in 3 years. Newark is now done, more or less, mostly more, in replacing lead pipe. And the very complex set of the scenario that led to that, if I'm not mistaken, our faculty member here, Professor Bufadel, was involved in advising the city on some of the issues about why all of a sudden was a rapid deterioration. It has to do with chemistry. I won't recite it because it's way out of. Anyway, why it all of a sudden accelerated. So we do, and I've seen Dean Evans over there, we do outstanding work in the built environment, using new materials, using smart materials, smart transportation systems. I don't see any of our transportation faculty here. But again, all leading up to this critical issue of climate change. And the beauty of what is happening in the current time, whether you read the current or the most recent June report from the UN, the various working groups, and I can't help but mention, because I read this just recently, and Karen Reif, who is Vice President for Renewables and Energy Solutions at PSE&G, is, I believe, going to be speaking to some of this. There are 2 new programs, or they're Race to Zero and Business Ambition for 1.5 centigrade. That's material right out of the UN report, and the UN report addresses it. The fact that PSE&G is so able to, and nimbly, already have responded to some of this, which, as you see in the report, UN report, is critical to slowing down the deterioration of our environment and the acceleration of climate change. So I thank you, Karen, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Later today, we'll have 2 panel discussions, and we're somewhat agnostic about expertise. So whether it's NJIT expertise, Rutgers expertise, or Princeton expertise, University of Buffalo, those folks will be here. And in particular, we'll also hear, I believe, from the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology. Judith Sheff is here. Judith leads that, and I must say leads it with such, again, alacrity and nimbleness that, and I happen to have the pleasure of serving on that commission. Judith will probably tell us how much money we've given out, but it's a lot, and particularly for startups. And while we're talking about startups at NJIT, NJIT this past month launched its innovation fund. And not unlike the $75,000 or $70,000 grants that you'll be hearing about from CSIT, we are similarly doing the same, targeting student, faculty, and alumni startups. So I thank you for the presenters' work today. Atam is getting up, which means I've got to read the last couple lines of my prepared comments. I thank you all for making the research possible, and I know together, between this university, other universities, the academy, and industry, and people like PSE&G, we can help, if not ameliorate, certainly slow down the deterioration of our environment. Thank you much. Have a great day here at NJIT.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, President Bloom. So I am going to introduce the coverage of the workshop program very briefly, and then we will have our distinguished keynote presentation by Karen Reif. So first of all, as I mentioned, that this is one of the 3 workshops that are going to be sponsored by National Academy of Inventors chapter at NJIT. This is the first one. So the 3 workshops are focused on environment, healthcare, and information. These are critical grand challenges for the world, and they are well aligned with the vision and strategic planning from several federal agencies, private organizations, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but they are also aligned with NJIT strategic research directions for the grand challenges in 2025 strategic plan. As you can see from this particular slide, the global drivers for the sustainable society, though there are many, but 3 are the most prominent one: the environment, healthcare, and the data and information sciences. Among the drivers, we see that there is a common thread of the enablers that starts with the technology, research, and innovation. And the technologies and innovation for their translation to market and implementation cannot be done without having the proper resources and the infrastructure support. That is also a critical enabler. And for that to happen, you have to have the proper governance and the policies so that we all are in compliance in moving in the right direction. In terms of these transformational changes to happen, we see some growth catalysts in the society, and those are communication, education, and socioeconomic equality. Anytime these catalysts go into the wrong direction, you would be diverted from your accomplishments and from the target goals. So for example, the miscommunication or misinformation or disinformation, we know that how that can distract us from what we are trying to do. For the same reason, the education, the workforce training, the skill set development are also very important catalysts. And specifically looking into that these critical grand challenges disproportionately impact the society, and particularly the one part of the society which is very significant but socioeconomically challenged, and we need to keep that in mind. So the purpose of these workshops is to create an open forum to facilitate a stakeholders partnership, because this cannot be accomplished without having very strategic partnerships. And they have to be developed at all levels, the regional, the state, national level, and also at the global level. So we are here today with the representation from academia, from the government sector, from the industry and corporations. So we are going to be looking into some of these challenges that are driving us towards issues related to the global environment and the climate change. As you know, the climate change has been a very, very critical global challenge, and it is the question of the sustainability. The environment that is built upon by air, land, and sea is disrupted by 3 major disruptors. And those disruptors are the way we produce energy and utilize energy, the way we create waste and manage waste, and the way we evolve with urbanization. So that ecosystem of the global environment, when it is disrupted, it has an impact. It has an impact on greenhouse emissions. It has impact on climate. It has impact on agriculture and the food, because the greenhouse emissions and the climate, severe weather changes disrupt that particular cycle of the agriculture and the food production. And eventually, it becomes the question of the survival of human and living beings. So as you know, that recently it has been on a global canvas with respect to the United Nations Climate Report and conference, but there are also other entities around the world that has taken this global challenge very seriously, because it is probably the most serious global challenge the world is facing today, and it is a question of survival. The continuously raising temperature of the Earth has caused us of great concern towards the survival, and we have been seeing that recently with respect to the tornadoes, the weathers, and all stuff. It is very alarming to see that the sea level has risen 112 millimeters since 1970. So the greenhouse emission, even though we have discussed at the global level at the United Nations that we would like to restrict to 1.5 degrees centigrades in the coming years. But we have to do better than that, because the thing is that we need to find out the technology, research, and innovation to make sure not only we put the first target of net zero emission, but try to find some ways to resolve this particular situation. So I'm going to be introducing the speakers and the panel discussions today. For this particular workshop that is focused on developing innovative pathways to limit greenhouse emission, reducing the negative impact of climate change. Today's workshop agenda is planned in 4 areas. The clean energy, and you are going to see the next talk, the distinguished talk by Kevin Reif in that particular area. And then later on in the second panel, we will see the discussion led by Pallavi Madhaksara. We are also going to look into the equity and sustainability. So we have a panel discussion on that. We will also look into the geo and environmental science and engineering-based technology solution that can reduce the greenhouse emission and move us towards a better stability in the global environment, towards reducing the negative impact of climate change. And then we will also see in our panel discussions and presentations that what could be the smart urbanization. We cannot stop evolving as a society, but there are smarter ways to evolve, and we are going to hear about that today. So this is the program as it is available on your tables with the program booklet. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce today's distinguished speaker, Karen Reif. She is not only the leader in many ways, but she's also a very strong advocate of the clean energy, renewable and energy solutions. She has led that initiative, which President Bloom mentioned, a very impressive one at PSE&G, with multi-billion dollars initiative in bringing the implementation of the clean energy solutions in our society, particularly in New Jersey. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Karen Reif.
Thank you. I'm very happy I don't have to wear my mask and talk, because I think that would be really difficult. Thank you very much. Thank you, President Bloom and Provost Dr. Deek and Dr. Dewan. Thank you for having me. On behalf of our Chairman, President, and CEO, Ralph Izzo, and everyone at PSE&G, thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's workshop. Thank you to the NJIT chapter of the National Academy of Inventors for organizing this gathering and providing a platform to further the important conversations on supporting the climate change. Is there a clicker? No. Okay, thank you. When Dr. Dewan first communicated with me about today's program, he asked for the title of my talk. I truly enjoy and speak a lot about energy efficiency and the variety of issues associated with climate change. However, I don't often assign a title to my remarks. But for today's sake of the program, I'm titling it The Power of Transformation. Why transformation? Because it's not just the electricity industry in New Jersey that has and continues to transform, or the gas or the water industry. It's also the way customers are using and thinking about the energy they consume. Oh, someone's advancing it. Thank you. Unless I did that. So let's start with the industry. This is PSEG's vision, which we call Powering Progress. Less energy being used, and the energy being used is cleaner and delivered more reliably than ever. In addition to providing a roadmap for a sustainable business, the Powering Progress vision offers a framework for fighting climate change. As you know, climate change represents one of the preeminent challenges of our time. Our nation's response, from Washington to Wall Street to Main Street, must be equal to this extraordinary task. As New Jersey's largest energy provider, we play an important role both in addressing the carbon emissions that are causing climate change and in mitigating the potential impacts on warming the climate. One of the architects of the electric industry and a native New Jerseyan, Thomas Edison, once said, "What you are will show in what you do." What we're doing at PSEG is evolving into a clean energy infrastructure-focused company committed to bringing the benefits of energy efficiency to every customer and giving them options to reduce their energy use, save money, and shrink your carbon footprint. And we're showing that it's possible for one of the nation's oldest utilities to pivot to entirely carbon-free generation and a focus on attaining net zero emissions in its utility operations. For more than a century, the mission and mandate of utilities were closely aligned with the major goal of society, providing universal access to an around-the-clock supply of safe, reliable, affordable power. And now we are excited to transform this model to add efficiency to these goals. It's important to note that the transformation represents a new and exciting way for us to engage and serve our customers and work with our regulators and policymakers. It's also a transformation that is beneficial to customers and to the environment. Our customers' view on saving energy are also transforming. Think back to when you were kids and we all were told to turn the lights off when we leave the room, turn off the TV. If you're not watching it, grab a sweater because it's going to be a little cooler in the house during the heating season. We all did these things oftentimes to keep our bills down, or oftentimes just because our parents told us and we had no idea what we were doing. Now our customers and each of us are making these decisions to help save the planet. That's part of the energy efficiency transformation, but there's still more to it than that. It's not just turning off the light, it's installing more efficient LED bulbs. It's not just grabbing an extra layer of clothing during the colder months. It's ensuring your home is properly insulated and working with us or your local utility company, if you're not in our service territory, to possibly upgrade to a more efficient heating system. Our programs offer residential, commercial, and industrial customers rebates and other financial incentives to purchase energy efficiency lighting, HVAC, equipment, and smart thermostats. Our customers are also eligible for free or affordable energy audits and energy efficiency kits. In fact, we're in the process of conducting an energy audit on 16 of the buildings here on NJIT campus. We're anticipating making upgrades that include LED lighting and installation of energy efficiency heating and cooling systems. We anticipate the project will be in the range of $4 million. NJIT is a long-time and valued customer, and we're pleased to embark on this new phase of our relationship as we work to make the campus more energy efficient. So I'm sure you're all asking, well, how can I get involved in this? I'm going to just skip forward a little bit. But on everybody's table, you'll all see like PSE&G orange stress balls, which are fun. But you'll also see, and I meant to bring it up, but maybe someone could just wave it over there. We have some brochures that represent our programs. We have the long, narrow one is residential. You'll see there's 5 programs that you can participate in, depending on what your needs are. Then there's a commercial and industrial brochure, and then we also have some EV programs, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. I just wanted to make sure I could like draw it together, and like please bring it home, share it with people. And I said it's not just us who has it. Every utility in New Jersey has these programs, so we want people to participate. We're in an odd industry where we're asking people to use less of our product. So please use less of our product because it's better for everybody. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the net zero climate vision for 2030 in June. So PSE&G introduced its net zero climate vision for 2030 last June. It's one of the first and most aggressive targets for a large utility and power generator, and accelerates our target for attaining net zero carbon emissions from utility operations by 20 years. Previously, it was for 2050. We are on track to eliminate nearly all fossil fuel generation from our portfolio by the end of this year or latest early 22. Moving forward, our power generation will be composed almost exclusively of our carbon-free nuclear plants, complemented by new investment and regional opportunities in offshore wind and grid-connected solar. This is also part of our evolving strategy, a strategy that began with our company focused on meeting the needs of a new century. The mission hasn't changed. In addition to working with our customers to reduce energy usage and ensure that energy is cleaner, we're focusing on delivering our product with greater reliability. Smart metering provides insights into how customers are using their electricity. With this knowledge, we can infer whether customers can do better by investing in a different heating system, which makes it possible to lower your bill and enjoy the same level of comfort as you've had before. Our electric vehicle program is another key element designed to help our customers reduce your energy consumption, lower your utility bills, and shrink your carbon footprint. We're building out an electric vehicle charging infrastructure that promises to bring meaningful customer and societal benefits. We've rolled out 3 programs this year. One is the Residential Smart Charging Program, which is focused on single-family homes. One is a mixed-use charging that's tailored to multifamily dwellings, government buildings, publicly accessible locations. You'll be seeing a lot of charging at gas stations, which I think is really interesting. And then the third is the public direct, the fast charging, which is looking at growing charging availability on major travel corridors and community locations. The next phase of our electric vehicle strategy includes a focus on medium and heavy-duty vehicles, which range anywhere from overnight deliveries to the buses you see on the streets. And to show how much we believe in electric vehicles, we also have a plan to convert the entire PSEG fleet to electric vehicles by 2030. Electrifying the transportation sector, which happens to be the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in New Jersey, not only in New Jersey, but also nationwide, is fundamental to achieving our state and national climate goals. The problem is right now you can't get a car or a charger. They all require the chips, but we know that that will be coming soon. Slide 9, you may have seen and heard some news reports associated with our offshore wind plans. PSEG and the New Jersey Economic Development Authority signed a lease allowing for a term of up to 78 years on land that will be home to the New Jersey Wind Port in Salem County. The port will provide a location for essential staging, assembly, and manufacturing activities related to offshore wind along the East Coast. The wind port is located adjacent to PSEG's nuclear generation site. Additionally, we've begun the process of developing a reliable, resilient, and cost-effective infrastructure to enable bringing the power generated from offshore wind farms to the coastline, where it will integrate with the utility grid that serves our region. This is another tool in our work to help New Jersey achieve its goal of 100% clean energy by 2030. Expanding our wind infrastructure will also create hundreds of skilled jobs over the next decade. The offshore wind industry, just in its infancy here, has the opportunity to create greater impact in the coming months and years. For a visual telling of where these issues land among PSEG's priorities, take a look at the matrix that is from our 2021 Sustainable and Climate Report, which you can also find on pseg.com. While all of the issues illustrated are of great importance within our company and externally for our customers, you can see that the issues we're discussing today are among the top concerns for our organization. Our energy efficiency program has saved more than 46,000 megawatt hours in 2020. Now, I'm sure most of you don't know what 46,000 megawatt hours mean, but what it's equivalent to is electricity used for 6,000 homes, and that's in 1 year. And we're also keeping nearly 36,000 tons of CO2 out of the environment. That was during our old programs. We rolled out these new programs, and just this year, we've saved more than 3 times that. So that's equivalent to 18,000 homes, and then it just builds on itself. So this all yields greater savings and great positive impacts to the environment. I want to recognize the team at PSE&G, talented professionals, and our dedicated union workforce who represent the fuel that is powering our transformation. Our passion is not just building a new business for our enterprise, we're also incredibly proud to be supporting the monumental change and the benefit that it brings to our customers. So I started this discussion regarding the subject of transformation. So I know, and I did say this in the you're all saying, how do I participate? How do I get involved? How do I help? It's literally as simple as taking time with your families to look at your energy use and habits. If you're our customer, please take advantage of our programs. You can even take advantage of them when you walk into some of the big box stores. We have a lot of lighting, and also if you're buying new appliances. You could also do a quick home energy report where someone will come into your home and point out different areas that you can improve. Some are short-term, some are long-term, some they'll do on the spot. And once you make the transformation, encourage your friends and associates to join you. If you don't live in our service territory, again, all the utilities in New Jersey have similar programs. All the neighboring states, if you live in a neighboring state, also have similar programs. No change is too small, and every change can make a meaningful difference. Thank you. Oh, and I brought them up here. I didn't realize I brought them. Thank you very much. I guess I have to put my mask back on. Yeah, just happy to answer any questions.
Sure. So,
do you guys want to use a mic? Here. If the technology.
Great. Thank you very much. That was really a good talk, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really delighted that PSE&G is right at the forefront of this change. One of the strong endowments of New Jersey is our nuclear power plants. We have a fairly large percentage of generation from nuclear power plants. However, those power plants are aging. Can you tell us about what the plans are for next generation, newer power plants here in New Jersey and what might be going on in the near future?
So I can tell you I'm personally not involved in the detailed operations of our nuclear plants, but I do know that our nuclear facility has the ability to run for at least another 10 years. I'm getting a yes, if not longer. And we're looking, we want to make sure it's safe. Of course, safety is the most important thing. So we're making sure that goes on. But that's part of the reason we're also looking at wind, increasing solar, energy efficiency, which is really the win-win because you use less. You use less at peaking, which for for electricity, you can't store it, so that really helps. And we're also excited about storage. So I think that it's a complement of everything, not just one. I think it's better, yeah.
So you're doing, this transition to net zero while also expanding the electrification of vehicles. I wonder if you have an estimate of how much, by 2030, how much our electric demand would increase because of electrification of transport.
So we have a lot of modeling about electrification of transportation. What's really interesting is every time we look at the modeling, it's going slower than we had anticipated. There's a lot of concerns that, or thoughts that that's because of range anxiety. So we're all used to driving around and being able to fill up anywhere we want, but there's not as much public charging, which is why we're moving forward with a public charging infrastructure. The nice thing about electricity, about both the combination of smart meters and the cars are smart also. So we're going to be having pilots and having different rate structures to incent people to charge at night. And if they can charge at night, and we've seen this in other states, it doesn't really increase, it does increase the electricity demand, and there's a lot of last mile work that has to happen. So for example, if just I do it on my street, it's not a big deal. But if everybody on my street decides to put in an electric charger, we need to upgrade to the street or to the homes. So it just really depends. So there's a lot of focus on hardening the last mile, which we are in the process of working through. But we think that we could, with all the new technological advances, we can be able to flatten the load more, which will not have as much of an impact. But it is something we need to keep an eye on.
Hello. Oh,
Yep.
First of all, again, thank you. A very informative talk, and kudos to PSEG. One of the issues we continue to meet on and discuss is the real supply chain problem, which many people outside of this room didn't know what that meant probably about 6 months ago, is the labor force, is the work talent. So as we look at your programs and programs in general about climate change, at the end of the day, there are always some barriers. You mentioned your unionized workforce. So some of us here are doing some work at the Newark port, and which is one of the second largest in the country. One of the problems is we don't have the workforce to bring in the technology, and people do not understand that the technology can be a job multiplier, not diminishing the workforce as you integrate technology. Atom and I and others finished a proposal not long ago, and one of the reasons that the proposal got slowed, almost stopped, was because it talked about modernization and robotics and automation. So I think just a recommendation, but your comments as well, I think as you talk about your programs, you should talk about workforce opportunities and the new jobs that are created as we get to clean energy. Clean energy is being opposed, you know this, because they think, the coal jobs, for example, right? It's going to stop. So if we need to accelerate this, which we know we need to scientifically, how do we deal, and we all need to be part of this workforce solution. Thank you.
So I'm actually happy you asked that. So one of the areas of our energy efficiency program that I didn't include in my prepared remarks, but that we have a huge focus on, is clean energy jobs. And we've committed to ensuring that at least 2,000 people from economic justice communities are trained and able to work in the clean energy jobs. To be quite honest, energy efficiency jobs is one of the largest growing jobs areas in the country right now, and we don't have enough talented, trained people in that area. So our job program has 3 prongs. One is employment, one is training, and one is actually helping smaller MWV, minority women, veteran business owners, sorry, we use a lot of acronyms, to be able to participate in this economy. We have, just this year, hired about 500 people from these economic justice communities, helped them get good paying jobs in this industry, and we see that increasing into next year. We think by the end of the year we'll be closer to 600. We're at about 50 a month. We're helping match them with it's almost, we're using job sources, but we're helping them match them with the good jobs. And we're providing a lot of training and other wraparound services that people who haven't participated in this kind of clean energy economy need help in the first couple months, often with childcare, or some of them have housing insecurity to help them get there. We also are kicking off a cohort. We're going to run 2 pilot cohorts where we're taking 20 people into each of the cohorts and training them on energy efficiency jobs so that they can get good paying jobs after the cohort, which will be about 3 months. So I agree with you. I'm really concerned that I won't be able to make my goals, and we as a country won't be able to make our goals because people don't want to work in this environment, and we need to help people get there. So we've committed to be able to do that.
Karen, great presentation today. Shihab Kuran from Power Edison. We've been looking at a lot of models for transportation, and simple back of the envelope math, we have 6 million light duty vehicles in New Jersey, and if everyone installed a level 2 charger like in the brochure, roughly about 10 kilowatts each, that's 6 million times 10 kilowatts, that's almost 60 gigawatts of added capacity. Now, the whole state of New Jersey's peak load today is about 17, maybe 20 max. So just light-duty vehicles can be another 60 gigawatts of new load that didn't exist before by the time if everything is electrified. Now, we haven't even said medium and heavy-duty, which in the state, they represent actually a larger percentage of greenhouse gas emissions. So is that from your models, is that, the first question, is that more of a last-mile problem, or is the backbone okay with this? I know people say, you can charge at night, but, chances are people go home and plug in. It can happen.
So it can happen, and it's something we're watching. I think it's going to be gradual. Right now, we have about 30,000 electric vehicles on the road. We want to increase that dramatically, but it's not going to happen overnight, right? We're going to have a long time, but we are modeling it and looking at it very closely. But again, there's a lot of technology. So our view is that you're not going to come in and you will come home. First of all, the whole workforce is changing, right? So people aren't all going to work and coming home at the same time the way they used to. I think that's one of the positives of COVID. So people will be charging at different times. But there's also amazing technology that you could say, I want to leave the house tomorrow at noon. Just make sure that I'm charged by noon and do it the least cost manner. So we need to be able to utilize that technology in a more robust manner to be able to levelize the load and not make it all just an additive peak. Because I agree with you, if everybody does it at the same time, it's a disaster. Yeah. But it's not necessary. And we have the technology, so we need to be able to roll it out appropriately and incent people appropriately to do it at the right way.
And my second question, so you've talked how people at the residential level can participate, or commercial, in terms of the programs. But how can we here, academia and the business sector, how can we help you in
You guys are doing a great job. I foresee us redoing this room. So, you guys are doing a great job by participating, but a lot of it is word of mouth. Because I could tell you, I get on the phone with a lot of people, and it's almost like one of those, it's too good to be true. And I can tell you, my colleagues who are here have the same issue. Because we are providing, I can get into the details, but we are providing free on-bill repayment. So it goes on your utility bill, you pay for it while you're saving the energy, and then it falls off and your utility bill goes down. So that's the benefit. We're providing rebates on whatever you buy. So if you buy a light bulb, if you need a new HVAC, if you need a new refrigerator, washer, dryer, we're providing you rebates. So we're trying to cover the difference between a regular and an energy efficient appliance or thing, whatever you're going to do. And then obviously as you get up into commercial and industrial applications, it gets a lot more complicated. So I think the best thing everybody could do, and that's why we wanted to make sure we bring all these brochures, is because people are very skeptical, right? we're paying you to use less of our product. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense from a business standpoint. It doesn't make sense from a capitalistic society. But the economics are clear. If you use less, we still get compensated appropriately. It's better for the environment. It's better for you because you save money. It's better for everybody. So, please, like, when you see these things, when you see it in a store, if you go to, I think we've sold $1.5 million worth of light bulbs since July just in Costco. So when you're in Costco and you see all those light bulbs, we're doing that because every light bulb saves money. And it's the easiest thing you can do. So please tell your friends, tell your businesses, tell folks.
So one last question. One last
Can you hear me
question
okay?
there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No, now we can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'll talk loud.
No, now we can hear you through the
A
microphone.
quick question. A train that seems to be leaving this station at the National Labs and at DOE is Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings, GEBs. Are you guys getting engaged with those, with that idea moving forward? It's sort of just moving out.
So I would tell you that where we are in New Jersey now, we were late to the energy efficiency game. We're fully in it now, but we were late to the energy efficiency game. Right now, we're really focusing on the low-hanging fruit, like get the light bulbs, the easier things. We are looking into the more complex things like that. But right now, our main focus is New Jersey needs to catch up. New Jersey is typically a leading state. New Jersey is one of the top states in solar. New Jersey in energy efficiency, the last time I saw was number 36. So we're focusing on getting there first, and then, but at the same time looking at some of the newer technologies to help.
Just 2 hours.
Good?
Yeah. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. That was great.
Of course. That was good.
So this is a good segue when we talked about the energy efficiency, as Karen pointed out. It is very important for us to make sure that how we consume the energy. It is not only how we produce the energy, but how we consume the energy to help the cause. So that gives me to the point of great pleasure of introducing the next panel discussion. And this panel is on the global challenges and the quest for sustainable solutions. And as I mentioned, energy is a part of it. Mr. Govi Rao is going to moderate this particular panel. And Govi is really a pioneer in energy monitoring and efficiency, has been a great supporter, has been a serial entrepreneur and leader in the field. And Govi will introduce the panelist.
Great. Thanks, Adam. This on again. Am I on? Thank you. Good morning. You guys need some coffee? Need to stand up, stretch? Yeah? All right. Efficiency is the name of the game. Dr. Bloom, thank you so much again. Inspiring comments, Karen, thank you. Great questions. My name is Govi Rao, and actually I'm going to be moderating this panel. I've got some amazing participants here. I've already been told to be more efficient and cut my time by half. Talk about that amazing efficiency. So Judith, can I invite you to the panel? I think we have Robin and Scott online. Will you come on in? Join the crowd on the top. So their bios are given. Ellie and Judith are here. Robin, can you hear us? There she is. Fantastic.
I can hear you, yeah.
Good morning. Scott, good morning. Thanks for joining us. And they've been listening to the morning session already, so we'll get started here in a second. A couple of things. I think Karen mentioned Edison's quote. I think there's about a gazillion Edison's quotes. The one that I like also is the power of the idea lies in how we use it. So today it's about using, and I love the dialogue. Today is about dialogue. So let's make this interactive, and you'll monitor my time, right? So make sure we have very interesting panels, great backgrounds, amazing people, and today is about dialogue, whether it's talent shortage, whether it's efficiency. You talked about do we have enough power? By the way, I don't think I've been to a gas station in 5.5 years. Yeah, 5.5 years. And I drive a lot. And there are cars available, by the way. There are some brands which you can still buy. And the other option, in fact, I'm driving this afternoon to North Carolina, which I do twice a month. I had range anxiety 5.5 years ago. Gone. In fact, thanks to PSE&G, I used to park at New Brunswick Station, charge there, take the train, free, of course. Yeah, there are second-order implications. We need to think about it. We need to talk about it, range anxiety. However, it's not just EVs, right? I mean, 5 years from now, mobility will look very different. Ever think about hydrogen? There's a whole city in Germany that's demonstrating hydrogen, right? So the load won't be just on our electric grid. So I'm sure PSE&G is looking at hydrogen as well. Europe is going away from natural gas. They're looking at electrification. I run a company called Phase Change Solutions. We're looking at advanced materials to make it more efficient. So thermal management of solutions, whether it's hydrogen or whether it is electric, doesn't matter. And you'll hear today from a whole bunch of people. And let's start the dialogue. And Atam has done a great job of pulling this whole stuff together with the rest of the team at NJIT in terms of getting the dialogue. The students, the faculty, private sector, academia, and Judith will talk about the Commission on Science and Technology. So I encourage you to ask the questions and come back again for dialogues. So it's a question of taking from dialogue to action with research in the middle, right? Let's kind of take notes. So with that in mind, let me ask Judith if you want to get us started with sort of your framework, and we'll get your slides on as well, and then we'll moderate it. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. And first of all,
Can you turn this one on as well?
great, thank you. And I certainly want to echo something that Karen said. I was probably one of the first people in my town that had the PSE&G energy audits. In the summer, a team came. They did a fabulous job. They gave me a report about things to do for my home, gave me some light bulbs and some power strips. So I really want to encourage all of you to participate in that program. On my first slide, if you can pull them up, I want to talk a little bit about innovation and the mechanisms that are important for driving. You can go to the next slide. The mechanisms that are important for moving from invention to innovation. You know, some of the problems that we sometimes see is that the great ideas that are created, whether it's at our academic institutions or in our startup companies, are stuck and don't get out into the marketplace. So we're really trying to see what are the factors that we need to pull together to drive that innovation forward, because innovation is really the translation of those ideas into commercial reality. And we know how important innovation is for our economy. And this morning, I was listening to one of the Freakonomics podcasts that was focused on the topic of venture capital. And one of the comments that was made by one of the key venture capitalists was that a lot of the innovation ideas are really coming from academia and our small businesses. Yes, ultimately, large corporate is going to have a role in implementing that, but a lot of the innovation comes from small businesses, so we need to do things to make it easy for academics, to make it easy for small businesses to be able to pull things together. And some of the capabilities and challenges that small businesses have as they're trying to move their innovations forward is that they have a lack of access to the resources that they need, whether it's the financial capital that they need, whether it's access to particular pieces of specialized equipment that may be resident in manufacturing facilities or university core labs, as well as the talent that we had talked about a little bit before. So some of the things that the Commission does is to try to help provide access to resources to enable inventions that are coming out of the universities and inventions that are coming out of startup companies to become innovations. It's critically important as well that we've got the framework surrounding the the focus point, that we've got the government policies that are going to make it easy for companies to be able to move forward, that we've got the incentives to help them move forward, and that we've got a group of intermediary organizations, whether it's trade organizations, other advocacy groups, that will help these companies move their inventions forward. So on the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the programs from the Commission on Innovation and Science, Innovation, and Technology that are really supporting the sustainable innovation economy in New Jersey. So the first thing I want to talk about is something called Research with New Jersey. This is a free online portal that has been developed over the last 5 years between the Economic Development Authority and the Office of the Secretary of Higher Education, where we've pulled together a free online database that will enable you to find experts, find equipment, find technology at New Jersey universities. We currently have 5 New Jersey universities who are participating in Research with New Jersey. We have the 3 R1 universities, NJIT, Rutgers, and Princeton, as well as 2 of our R2 universities, Montclair and Rowan, are participating. You can go onto this website, you can type in search terms, whatever you're looking for, and it's going to feed you back research outputs, papers, faculty, and core facilities to try to facilitate the ability of companies to be able to work with academia, as well as make it easy for academics to find collaborators in other universities. So you might be someone who's working here at NJIT and you want to find out, is there a potential collaborator elsewhere to be able to work on a grant opportunity with you? You can use this Research with New Jersey portal to drive things forward. We're looking to make enhancements to the portal to add additional university capabilities, as well as figure out if there's a model that would allow for some of our federal labs in New Jersey, such as the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab or the Picatinny Laboratory or the FAA facilities, to be part of Research with New Jersey, as well as figure out for small companies, is this a good way for them to be able to promote the innovations and the technology that they have. Around the clean tech space, the Commission has run a number of programs to help small businesses. Many small businesses will initially look at a program called SBIR, STTR, as a mechanism for driving some of their innovation and research activities. The federal government provides these non-dilutive research grants to companies to help them do the R&D capabilities, and the Commission has had a matching program where we're able to provide an additional $25,000 or $50,000 to companies who have received these federal grants. When the Commission first started, when I joined back in January of 2020, we ended up giving out $350,000 to 13 companies. We're now on our 3rd cycle of the program. We've about tripled the amount of money that we're going to be making available. We just completed the application period. We had 37 applications that were submitted, and if all of them come through the scoring process, we'll be able to give over $1 million of funding to 37 companies. In addition, we have partnered with the EDA and the Board of Public Utility on a Clean Tech Seed Grant program where we're able to provide to startup companies who are working on technology to reduce or mitigate greenhouse gas emissions research grants of up to $75,000. In June, we gave out close to $750,000 to 10 companies. We were oversubscribed by a factor of 2, and so we're envisioning being able to rerun that program in early 2022. And then lastly, we've been doing a lot of work on diversity, innovation, and inclusion. Actually, NJIT is the lead on an NSF advanced grant along with Rutgers and Princeton and a number of other New Jersey universities, the Commission and NJ-EDGE, to help female faculty get the support that they need to move their inventions along the commercialization pipeline.
Great. Thank you, Judith. Thank you so much. As you can tell, there's so much happening here in New Jersey. You'll hear later also in the next panel from Pallavi from EDA, and also I think Commissioner Shivakula from the Board of Public Utilities is going to be here to talk a little bit about those programs as well. So thank you again. Robin, can I invite you to jump in and talk a little bit about what you're doing at Rutgers? Phenomenal. Talk about social inequity and inequalities. There's some things we need to make sure that we are paying attention to. So if you want to take about 3 minutes or so, 3 to 5 minutes, Robin, that'll be great. Thank you.
Sure. Are you guys able to hear me okay, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then I had some slides.
Yes,
that,
it's going to go up in a second.
Okay, perfect. I
as
wasn't
you
sure if
speak.
I was
Yep.
supposed to share. So yeah, let me just start. I'm an economic geographer at Rutgers. My work really emphasizes kind of social and economic impacts of climate change. So I'm definitely in the social science space. So it's wonderful to be among sort of a more engineering focused space. And I actually also very much appreciate the invitation. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to come in person, but let me just say, so my work focuses a lot on the idea of the need for equity in climate change planning, especially planning around climate adaptation. Both of the first two speakers, or Judith and as well as Karen, really brought up and did a good job with getting us thinking about all the ways that we can bring equity into our mitigation actions. If you could advance, please, the slide. But I think also we often, when we think about climate change and we think about equity, it's also really critical to start to bring the equity conversation into the climate adaptation conversation, sort of bringing it almost full suite. So we tend, I think, mostly think about climate change and equity from this perspective of uneven vulnerabilities, and we certainly saw those with Ida, we saw those with Sandy. If you could advance the slide one, please. We also see, though, equity is it's not just about uneven impacts, especially differential impacts on poor communities, communities of color, communities that are sort of already dealing with environmental justice issues, but also it's about uneven capacity to adapt. So even across communities, there's differential abilities to adapt across municipalities, across cities, even across neighborhoods these are just some photographs from the post-Sandy work where we were seeing very uneven impacts, even at the very local level of particular neighborhoods. If you could advance. But I think also when we think about equity, it's also about making the conversation about adaptation more equitable, getting more voices into the room. And as you know, I'm talking to, I assume, mostly a room full of engineers who are very engaged in the ways the infrastructure systems can become more resilient, the ways we can develop hard infrastructure to protect the city, to protect the region. I know that New Jersey City, of course, is vulnerable. New York, certainly, the work I've been doing is highly vulnerable. Much of New Jersey. But that adaptation planning process needs to, I'm arguing, also pay attention to equity. And so these are a couple of reports that have come out through Rutgers and the New York City panel on climate change. If you could advance one more. And advance the slide one more, please.
Hey, Dan, can you advance the slide, please? Thank you.
So I just want to mention this when we think about equity in bringing equity into the climate change discussion, what we most often focus on are sort of these disparities in outcomes, the inequalities that I already mentioned. We also, though, need to recognize what are the social processes, the economic processes that are creating the uneven vulnerabilities. And this can be everything from economic inequalities. We heard a little bit even in the keynote mentioned about, sort of the capitalistic way of, sort of doing business, et cetera. It's also sort of, a way that tends to, as we see, reinforcing inequalities and that definitely undermines somewhat our ability to plan for climate change. But then the third piece of equity that I think is beginning to get more and more attention and increasingly recognized is this need for procedural equity. And this is very much straight out of environmental justice work for folks who have been in that space for a while. But that it's the idea of ensuring that communities are participating in the adaptation planning and decision making, as well as mitigation planning, any sort of clean energy planning, new types of planning, that the community voices are heard, the community voices are listened to, and sort of engaged, highly engaged in the process. And then if you could just, last slide. One before that. So yeah, so just, I guess, what I just want to maybe emphasize again that equity, we sometimes think of equity as, oh, that's the latest thing we need to pay attention to. It's the extra box we need to add into our proposals, into our work. But I actually would argue that leading with equity is a way to make climate change actions stick. If the actions are acceptable to communities, if they're acceptable to people, that's the key to ensuring that they're not simply voted out in the next election, that they're sort of that it's a sustainable response. And I'll stop with that.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. There's so many questions from each of these talks. We need to make sure that we actually have a follow-up. That's why we have a 3-part series here. So, Robin, we'll come back with dialogue and questions as well. Thank you so much, by the way. Really appreciate your work also. I'm going to switch to Scott. If you look at genomics and hydrology and modeling and the impact on climate change, Scott's work has taken us to the next frontier. So, Dan, if you want to put up Scott's slides, go ahead, Scott. If you want to spend 3 minutes and give us a quick overview, that'll be great. If you can unmute yourself. Scott comes to us from the State University of New York in Buffalo.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for the invitation. What I'd like to talk about is primarily focusing on Earth system models. So as we know, Earth system models rely very heavily on, you can go back to the title for the moment. They rely very heavily on use of past data and our current understanding of mechanisms, the sort of atmosphere, ocean, and land processes to make projections into the future, give us a way to peer into the future of what might happen. What I want to talk about today is how we use these models as technology, both for education and communication, right? So we see with the IPCC reports that a lot of the products that are produced are from Earth system models. And we use that and in a sense that we're looking at the abiotic changes, so things like elevated temperature, which leads to elevated vapor pressure deficits. That really represents the dryness of the atmosphere. So as the atmosphere gets warmer, it has a higher capacity for water, but it may not necessarily always have more water in it, and therefore it has an increased demand for it. And that dries out the soil. And I want to focus on a couple of things. One is threats to ecosystems and the other to agriculture. With ecosystems, the issue, of course, is that they provide services like fresh water. They provide food and fiber, and they have intrinsic value. There are a host of other things that we could talk about. And of course, agriculture, in order to have sustainable agriculture going out into the future, looks like the slides crashed.
No. Do you want the next slide or you?
I don't see oh, there we go. If we go back up, previous slide, please. So a couple of things with agriculture and with ecosystems, of course, is elevated mortality and reduced productivity, particularly with agriculture, reduced productivity. And there are a couple of opportunities that we see for improving the models. One is a better understanding of the hydrology, in particular how plant hydrology sort of coevolution takes place. And the other is through the use of plant genomic information coupled with biophysical models. You can go to the next slide. So what you're looking at here is a change in vapor pressure deficit of the atmosphere over the last century. And so wherever you see red, what you're seeing is that those areas, the atmosphere is getting drier. That means it has a higher capacity for water, and it's not receiving that water. And what that's going to do is dry out the soil. And so any place where you see red, and you can see that a lot of these are these are areas in the south, the global south, places that are already vulnerable areas, places in the southwest U.S., places in Africa, in the Middle East, in Australia, and so forth. much of the world is getting drier in the atmosphere, and that's leading to increased evapotranspiration, so water moving from the land surface to the atmosphere, which increases soil drought. So it exacerbates and intensifies droughts. And of course, when plants experience high vapor pressure deficit and soil drought, they close their stomata. And so this leads to a couple of things. One is a dramatic decline in primary production. So crops and natural systems will suffer. And plant mortality will increase. And we're seeing widespread mortality of forests throughout the world that are on the uprise. We're seeing increased numbers of widespread forest mortality in the last 50 years. Next slide. And so if you look at this figure here, what this is showing is on the global sort of northern hemisphere, projected loss of needle evergreen trees for at the end of the century. This projection is based on various Earth system models, and the color denotes the amount of agreement there is between models. Now, one of the issues with these models, of course, is that they have some limitations in terms of their representation of both the hydrology and the physiology of the plants. So the weak representation of hydrology is a major contributor to the disagreement we see with models, and limited understanding of plant physiological responses, in particular to novel conditions. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, these models rely heavily on past analogs. So we understand how plants responded in the past. We don't understand very well how plants will respond to novel environmental changes. Next slide. So we have an opportunity to improve hydrology, and the Earth systems modeling community is focused very heavily on trying to understand the co-development of vegetation and hydrologic processes. Vegetation, of course, if we can sort of pinpoint where vegetation has access to water, we get a better understanding of where that vegetation is going to thrive. And this is going to improve both the precision and accuracy of models, and ultimately lead to better communication of the science to policymakers. If we can make more robust models that are more convincing, not so drastic in predictions of loss of vegetation, but rather more realistic ones, then the message is improved. Next slide. And then a second opportunity is use of genomics. So with genomics and environment, so that G by E is really combining genomic information and how it responds to environmental changes. We can start to think about integrating plant responses, looking at integrated genomic responses along with our biophysical models. And so we get a better understanding of how plants would respond to novel conditions as we go out into the future. So this is where this can really help with identifying, in particular, crop types. So this is information that can be provided to breeders, but it also can educate policymakers on going forward and improve our Earth system model technology. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Thank you so much. And there's so much implication for technology if you just take a look at the modeling and get to the next level. And now we'll talk a little about the impact and maybe talk about an example about urban systems and how do we make our cities and villages livable by using technology in the right way. So Ellie, you want to give us a little bit of your framework? And then if you want to switch to Ellie's slides, that'll be awesome.
Yep. It's working, yep. So I'm Elie Bouzid from Princeton University, and for the last 10 years I've been very interested in cities and the urban environment. And more recently, this also evolved into an interest in cities and technology. Once the slides go up, I'll tell you more about it. So So urbanization is proceeding at a truly unprecedented pace. My first slides, for example, will show how the world's largest cities, so we can go one slide down. So this is an animation of the largest cities in the world going to 2100. LA and New York are part of this, and when we go to 2100, you see that some of the world's biggest cities will all be in Africa. So urbanization is proceeding at an unprecedented pace. We're in the midst of the second wave, and it's global, and increasingly this is going to be in the global south and in developing countries. And the way these cities evolve is going to be as important for global carbon emissions and our livelihoods all around the planet. So next slide, please. And so when we talk about cities and technologies, we have to remember that cities would not be possible without technology. Cities are, to a large extent, the result of technology. Agricultural technology allowed us to produce the excess food that made the first cities possible. Building and elevator technologies allowed us to grow bigger, denser cities in a small amount of space. And then transportation technologies reversed that trend and allowed for sprawl. So the relation between cities and technologies is very old. Next slide. And it's going to continue. So today, our cities are what we call systems of systems. So a complex system of systems to provide us with food security and so on. So it's a big engineering or engineered system. Next advanced one. But it's a bit more complicated because when you design, let's say, a light bulb, you don't have to worry about maybe the global climate. But when you think about cities, you have to worry about how they interact with earth systems and with socio-economic system. So it makes urban planning and predicting the futures of city even more complicated. Next slide. Now, there's a lot of interest in cities and technology and smart cities. And unfortunately, it's often reduced to some gimmicky thing like, smart trash bins or something like that. But it should really be more of that. If cities are so inherently connected to technology, and because technology is changing at an unprecedented pace, it means that cities will also change at an unprecedented pace. So we have, not yet, can we go back one slide, please? So basically, there's innovations in materials, in water technology, in energy technology, and many other things that basically are going to change our cities. But we have to remember also that technology is not an end. It is actually a means. And so we have to decide what we want our cities to look like. In Princeton, for example, the Metropolis project, which I lead, we basically state that our goals are cities that are more sustainable, resilient, livable, and equitable. And so technology is the tool to take us there. Next slide, please. And so if we want to go there, often we basically want kind of the silver, we look for a silver bullet. This will not exist. So just like the discussion on energy that we had this morning with PSENG and with the questions, it's not going to be solar only. It's going to be solar, wind, hydrogen, nuclear, and energy efficiency. And the same thing with, could we go down one slide, please? One slide down, please. Okay, so what I wanted to say on the next slide is that we really need to think about technology portfolios. So for cities to become basically to have all these attributes, we should start thinking about portfolios that are gonna encompass new water technologies, new green infrastructure, new materials, new energy system, and probably most important of all is new transportation systems. Can we go down a couple of slides, please?
We have a little bit of a technology issue in moving the slide
Okay.
to get there. So
No worries.
Go ahead.
So this is kind of the wedge, but anyway. So again, we need to think about portfolios, and one of the most important part of these portfolios is mobility. Today we basically, can we animate? Can we just click down a couple of times? Let's do it 3 more times. Okay, so sorry, I animated my slides too much. One more time, and that's it. Okay, thank you. So we have again, we talked a lot about electrification of the fleet, but it's not happening alone. We also have autonomy and connectivity that are coming into our city. We have sharing. There's estimates that we can move around with 10% of the car fleet that we have today if we all use shared cars. And there's also micromobility. And all of these technologies are coming along to change the way we move in our cities. And so New Jersey is the densest state in the nation, and we can be leaders in how we understand and integrate all of these technologies again to make cities more sustainable, resilient, livable, and equitable. And so we formed a little consortium of a few professors, myself included, Michel Boufadel, who will be on the next panel from NJIT. And again, you see that we have Rutgers also, and we crossed the Hudson because heat and pollution don't stop don't understand political borders. So again, what we're trying to ask is with all this revolution in mobility, how can we maximize the benefits and leverage it to basically improve other aspects of our city? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Give them a big hand of applause. You can switch to the next panel slide. Before we go into the next slide, I want to take maybe time for one or two questions. I only have about 200, but we'll get to mine later on. Any questions from the audience at this point? If not, I'll ask you questions. Ashdeep, go ahead. There's a microphone there, or yeah, right behind you. Michael's getting on it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think Govi's right that there's a lot of questions coming up, but I think sort of most top level, what would y'all say is the most insightful thing you learned from each other's frameworks today, from listening to each other? Yeah, in terms of overlap of your work.
Yeah, that was a loaded question.
It's really loaded.
I can maybe start by, Judith was mentioning this, the research with New Jersey. I actually did not know about it. And it's very important for researchers and scientists to be able to talk to each other. So this project that I mentioned started by basically the research offices in the multiple universities of New Jersey, trying to have symposia to talk about different topics, and one of them is transportation. And this effort was basically came out of this these symposia. So I think it's getting people to interact and talk about their interest and research can really lead to new ideas, new collaborations. And so this is something that New Jersey is trying to, if you want, initiate or start at a high level. So a few years ago, all the president of the R1 universities in New Jersey and also some of the other universities started to look at how we can increase collaboration between the universities, because I think sometimes we live in a world where expertise is so detailed and narrow, and so sometimes you need a specific knowledge or capacity that you don't have in your institution, and so it's great to have this portal. I'll go check it out today.
Thanks, thank you. I mean, this is brilliant because that's a dialogue that we're talking about here. I'll switch to Robin online there. Anything you picked up, Robin, from the other conversations and from the keynote and from Joel and Atam and everyone else?
I think it's almost along the same lines of what Ellie was just mentioning, like that. I think there's just huge opportunities for more collaboration across, like with our institute, the Rutgers Climate Institute, with NJIT, with folks at Princeton. I mean, I know there's already collaborations happening, but I think we have I'm just really excited by that possibility of just working. I think our missions are very aligned right now. We know that it's a climate emergency, and we all want to find solutions to that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Robin. Thank you. And I'm going to switch to Scott. Scott, can you give us a little bit? I think there's a tremendous potential for us to take this to the next level in terms of action. So, Scott, do you want to give a 10-second about what you picked up? Anything new from here?
Sure. I think what I sort of pick up is that we tend to think in our silos, and it's very helpful to be able to have sessions like this to really see where connections can be made. How do we make those silo walls have porous walls, or even tear down those walls?
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. Brilliant. Well said. And I'll have Judith wrap up with what you picked up something from this conversation.
Well, I was really excited to see all of the different collaboration opportunities, and we know that there's going to be a lot more federal money coming around these climate issues, and I see that there's really going to be some great opportunities for us in government to help catalyze and bring people together to go after some of the federal dollars to help improve what's going on. You know, today Biden should be signing the infrastructure bill, which has a lot of activities associated with, with addressing climate change and infrastructure.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Judith. Again, Ash, thanks for the amazing question. As you can tell, the dialogue has started. Let's move to action. With that, I'm actually going to get into action, giving it to Atam, who's going to introduce Commissioner Shivkula for us at this point, right? And give a big hand of applause for the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent conversation this morning, presentations, and also the questions. It is my great pleasure now to introduce our Commissioner, Upendra Chivikula. He's the Commissioner of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Where did he get? He was here. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking over there. You were sitting. Sorry. Commissioner Chivikula has been a very, very strong supporter of clean energy, has been a great friend of NJIT, but he has been a very strong advocate of finding out the innovative ways to meet the challenges in New Jersey with respect to the energy demands. And no wonder he's basically electrical engineer. So I would like to request Commissioner Chivikula to give us some remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Dhawan. My schedule really a little bit shaken up, but I want to thank NAI-NJIT chapter for giving me this opportunity. And the remarks I'm going to be making will have nothing to do with the board because the board has 5 members, and so whatever comments I'm going to make, these are my own, and I cannot attribute it to the board. That's the disclaimer I have to say. And having said that, now I'm free. I can say anything I want. The interesting thing is this clean energy, renewable energy journey started for me early 2000s. Like I've been talking about the solar energy for 2008. We had the solar renewable energy credit certificates we were able to come up with. Then in 2010, we were able to do the offshore wind, and was started with 1,100 megawatts of offshore wind, and now, under the leadership of Governor Murphy, now we are shooting for 7,500 megawatts. And so when you look at that, and then now after that Clean Energy Act of 2018 brought about a lot of changes in terms of storage. You had to have 2,000 megawatts by 2030, and we have trying to have 50% clean energy by 2030, and then you have by 2050, 100% clean energy. So these are all lofty goals, and we need to strive for that. I think they are part and parcel of addressing climate change. And after that, we got involved in the Clean Energy Act, brought about transportation issues, trying to incentivize electric vehicles, and creating the infrastructure for charging stations at various levels, level 1, 2, 3, and trying to create the structure. Also, with new FERC commissioners coming in, and we have this issue of MOPR, which is a minimum offer price rule, has been quite controversial and has caused us a lot of acid reflux in New Jersey because of the way people who are using the energy, they're not paying, and then the federal government is putting restrictions, like FERC is putting restrictions on what kind of energy you can have as a state. It's an issue of federalism where the states have the autonomy to do a lot of things about their energy. Those things are being challenged, and so I mean, there's so much has taken place, and the Board of Public Utilities has been on the forefront of many things. One, a major initiative that's going on is that grid modernization. When you talk about bringing clean energy at various levels and having the smart meters, advanced smart grid and advanced technologies in metering, and all those things have really bringing different levels of devices, internet devices, and consumer as not only a consumer is also producing. So the new term is a prosumer. So they are not only producing, they are also consuming. So I think we are involving. I think I saw the EDA slide that talks about environmental justice. One of the important things that at the board we have done is that even though we were able to give solar renewable energy certificates, but those people who are on the low and moderate income, they were not able to benefit from the solar installations. And so we had created a program called Community Solar, and there's been a very successful pilot first year, and the second year is also successful. We are moving into a full-fledged program, and almost 650 megawatts of community solar that is going to be coming along. So you look at sustainability, and transportation is more than 40% of carbon. And so trying to do the electrification, and not only the transportation, we're also trying to electrify the buildings, and so trying to create electric heat pumps and try to see how we can bring about electrification to the buildings. But the challenge is, there are many challenges. One is New Jersey has 75% of its infrastructure based on fossil natural gas, and 10% based on oil heating. And how do you move 85% of the fossil infrastructure and in an affordable way? Because a lot of the times whenever you bring all these new initiatives, the people at the lower end of the economic scale, they are the ones affected most. And so how do you balance the ratepayer interest and as well as trying to address the climate change issue? So these are some of the things that we are trying to do. And so we have from transportation to electric generation, trying to do the grid modernization, and also after Hurricane Sandy, the resilience of the electric grid was tremendously affected. And so we're trying to see how we can create microgrids, and microgrids combining solar and battery storage, and some cases you have CHP, combined heat and power. And recently, the governor legislature passed a law to create a fuel cell task force. This is predominantly hydrogen. What is the role hydrogen is going to play in sustainability, and not only static generation as well as transportation. And so there are a lot of the challenges that are taking place, and so I am really excited that what we are trying to do under Governor Murphy's leadership, that we are really trying to address all these issues at the same time balancing the ratepayer interest, and which is a very challenging and daunting task. And so we are excited about it. I think one of the things that is missing, my observation, personal observation, is that engagement of the end user. A lot of the times people look at the recycling program. For example, in New Jersey, it went above 50%, now it is below 50%. So we don't have any landfills. A lot of material has been just dumped into the landfills. And we do have the new laws which are brown bags and plastic bags and trying to do certain things. But it's a movement. It has to come from grassroots. And a lot of these things are coming from top down, from Governor Murphy. In order to really make it effective, each and every citizen, resident of New Jersey has to get involved and own it. I think that is the most important thing. That's where I see the academic institutions to getting to the people, because the politicians, people don't trust politicians, but they trust universities. Hopefully they do. And so we want to make sure that universities spend some time in consumer education research. I think that is very important. And I think I am running out of time, and Professor Dhawan stood up. That means I had to. But I just want to thank you for this opportunity. Apologize for the little bit of shuffling of the schedule, but appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Chavikola. You really blended up what we started with the first introductory slide today. And if you recall that particular slide, if I could bring it down. So it's really the all community engagement, as you pointed out very appropriately, that we have to take our responsibility and accountability in order to move the whole mission forward in order to create the sustainable environment. And it's also very important, as you pointed out, that governance and policy are very critical in order to make sure that the resources and the infrastructure is developed in order to bring the technology, research, and innovations translation to the end user. And that's why we need to make sure that these enablers are in place, but also the catalyst in terms of proper education, proper communication of the factual information, as well as its relationship to development of the next generation of the workforce and the people, training and education. And it's very interesting to see you mentioning that the people trust educational organizations, but also we need to make sure that we communicate through our ambassadors, who are our graduates in the environment, into the field, that wherever they go, they work all together as a team to move the cause forward. So with that particular note, it's my pleasure to introduce the next panel. And next panel is really where we put the blendedness of is that we need to look into not only the technology innovations, but also to find out whether we can bring their translation to the market, right? So it's my great pleasure to introduce the panelist, and I would like to invite Pallavi Madhagasara, and sorry. Michelle Bufadel, Shannon Tai, and Wumik Sadiq. So let's start their presentations first. You have 3 to 5 minutes for the presentation, and I will request Pallavi to get us started.
Thank you.
We can have the PowerPoint slide.
Can you hear me? No. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I guess I'll just start talking. First of all, thank you very much, Govi, Atam, Dr. Joel. I know he's not in the room right now. I think it's working. For letting me speak here on behalf of Tim Sullivan, the CEO at the EDA, but just broadly talking about clean energy and the efforts that the state is investing in from an EDA, from an economic growth standpoint. I don't see my slides up, but I'm just going to keep going. For me, and generally speaking, when you think about addressing the impacts of climate change, it's really much more than just creating a sustainable future for generations to come. It just also happens to be an incredible opportunity to achieve Governor Murphy's vision for a stronger, fairer, more equitable economy by driving long-term economic growth in the green economy, right? Sorry. You can flip to the next page. Thank you. So essentially, Governor Murphy has laid out what's known as the Energy Master Plan for the state. It sort of is this overarching framework, which has about 7 key strategies. I'm not going to walk through everything that's on the page here. These are 7 sort of pillars, if you will, that enable the state to get to where it needs to be, which is really this vision for a decarbonized future in New Jersey. And that touches on a variety of different industries. Essentially, what this page tells you is it's a combination of everything from investing in how we generate electricity, so creating electricity from renewable power, to reducing emissions, right? But in doing so, ensure that there's environmental justice, ensuring that there is inclusion and there is a direct impact to overburdened communities in the state. So these are overburdened communities by definition are those that are at the receiving end of climate and climate change related impacts. The other key thing, just given that I'm in the midst of such distinguished researchers here, so it's an honor to be here on that, there's an explicit strategic pillar here from the Energy Master Plan that touches specifically on the innovation economy. This specifically talks about expanding the clean energy innovation economy. See, I started as a solar researcher. I used to make organic PVs on like 0.3 millimeter square on plastic substrates way back in University of Texas. So it sort of brings me back home every time I visit a university or visit a research lab. I kind of miss those days. I'm actually very thrilled that we no longer ask each other about, hey, how efficient is the panel? Because that used to be the thing almost on a monthly basis. You had press releases where people talked about how efficient panels were. It's incredibly exciting that we fast forward to a point where we're talking much more about what's the impact of investing in clean energy, just broadly. Nobody cares how efficient it is because people assume it works, right? So what all this means and what this is to say is New Jersey's already on the path to achieving some of these goals, right? I think you heard Karen mention this earlier this morning. New Jersey is ranked in the top 10 states in terms of total installed solar PV capacity in the country. This didn't happen overnight, right? These were driven largely through government policies and subsidies and in the private and public sector interaction over time. Which, in fact, last week I was at an event where Governor Murphy announced what he called as a course acceleration. So we're no longer looking to decarbonize only by 2050, but there's an interim goal we need to hit substantially faster in terms of emissions reductions by 2030. I was at this a former landfill Superfund site called Mount Olive, which is now currently, construction has begun on what's going to be a 25.6 megawatt solar project, which will power, I think, close to about 4,000 homes. This is the largest such project in North America at this point. So it's incredibly exciting that we are thinking about sort of transitioning to a decarbonized future, and we have a strong foundation. Thanks for flipping to the next page here. The state is already also committed to offshore wind. You've heard through a number of presentations before me, New Jersey is building the first purpose-built offshore wind port at Lower Alloways Creek. This is actually sort of the aerial sort of picture or a schematic, so to speak, of what the port will look like. This is not just about building wind turbines and putting them up into the waters to generate electricity. As you can imagine, from an economic growth standpoint, this truly drives supply chain and manufacturing innovation. And the idea here is the state wants to, and we're committed to, thanks to Governor Murphy's leadership, is to make sure that this manufacturing and supply chain development of components happens domestic to New Jersey. And we have incredible programs in the state, such as the offshore wind tax credit program, that actually are drawing proposals and bids from potential applicants that are likely to be developing specific parts and components that will ultimately be assembled into these large 7.5 gigawatt wind turbine facility. Go to the next page. So this is going to create about 1,500 permanent jobs and over $500 million in new economic activity. So this is massive, right? So this is one way of looking at economic development through clean energy. Another way to do it is from a consumption standpoint. You can go to the next page. I'm just going to flip through a few examples here. This is through a collaborative effort with the Department of Environmental Protection and our colleagues at the Board of Public Utilities and various other state agencies and the governor's office. The EDA launched a program called the New Jersey Zero Emission Incentive Program, or NJIT for short. We started with a $15 million pilot program. This is essentially a voucher program that reduces the upfront cost of purchasing a zero-emission medium-duty truck. So we decided we would pilot so that we would learn and pivot as we needed. The goal is essentially to allow businesses that want to purchase new zero-emission vehicles to make it more affordable. So we essentially cover the cost of a diesel alternative versus a new zero-emission vehicle. And in some cases, if you're a woman, veteran, or a minority-owned business, the benefits sort of stack up, and in some cases, the cost of purchasing a zero-emission vehicle becomes cheaper than buying its diesel alternative. So we started with a 15 million pilot focused on Greater Newark and Greater Camden. Again, the impact trying to drive it through overburdened communities. The program was so successful, we subsequently expanded the program to the Greater New Brunswick area by nearly $10 million. I'm incredibly thrilled to report that over 75% of the applicants are small and micro businesses. So these are businesses with less than 15, or in some cases, less than 5 employees. And 50% of the applicants are certified women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses. So this is truly about driving purposeful economic growth where it matters the most. And finally, building on this success, the board just approved a $20 million expansion of this program to the greater shore communities. The shore communities have been through the worst of it through the pandemic and have, for over a decade, lived through serious impacts of climate change. So the goal here is we are trying to build upon the success of this program and eventually get to a point where we can hopefully scale it at a statewide effort. You can go to the next page here. All this is to say is, look, clean energy and investment in clean energy is serious business for NJEDA and just overall for every state agency in the state here. All this also means is for researchers like yourself, New Jersey is set to become a hotbed for climate tech innovation. The EDA, in fact, recently partnered with SOSV, which is a leading venture capital firm around the world, to bring their HACS accelerator. The HACS accelerator program, I see there, thank you for the thumbs up. It's always exciting to see people that are familiar with this partnership. So we're bringing HACS to New Jersey. HACS focuses centrally on hard tech manufacturing, and HACS in New Jersey will focus on decarbonization and supply chain, amongst other areas of focus. So again, this is another pathway to get to inclusive economic development at the heart of the state. And finally, you have Judith Sheft here. She touched on this. We ourselves, through the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology, supporting early-stage companies by providing up to $75,000 a company, so long as they're supporting our transition to the decarbonized future. We are offering seed grants. I know I sort of went through a mix and matchup of different programs just to give you a sense for the various portfolio of projects that the EDA is looking at, and my team and I'm leading for the state. So happy to take any questions at any point.
Wonderful. So we will go through the next presentation, and then we will ask the audience for a few questions. So Michelle Bufadel is the next presenter.
Thank you. Okay. What you will hear today is an engineer actually trying to reach out to social sciences. When a couple of years back, we started working. We were approached to work on resilience, and like the first thing, what is resilience? And as an engineer, we figure out that we need to quantify it. We hear a lot of discussion about resilience. So we started an effort to quantify resilience. But this is one of the hats that I wear. So I want to just mention, next slide, please. I can do it, sure. So my other hat is like we do floodplain delineation, we do a lot of computation, we use supercomputers to predict the floodplains. Which one is the next one?
The green, big green.
The green one, okay. Recently, we've been working on, for example, the transport of the virus, COVID, in supermarkets. And then we collaborated with Dr. Elie Bouzaid on a study to understand how the number of cases of COVID-19 spread in the country, and we found it to be related to population, and now we're zooming in more to address susceptible communities, which kind of harkens on the topic of environmental justice, that you could find a symptom and then you can maybe try to relate it to the conditions that cause high numbers in certain locations. But regarding today's topic is, let's briefly, climate change and resilience. Now we know because of climate change, we're going to have continuous sea level rise. But also, more importantly, inland, we're going to have an increased rate and severity of storms and droughts. New Jersey enacted a new law, it's S-2607, requiring resilience planning for communities. Well, what's community resilience? It is the ability of a community to prepare for, respond to, and recover following a disruptive event, namely a natural disaster. Now, how to quantify resilience? There are indices that exist, that are used. Typically, they are more for social vulnerability. They emerge in the field of social sciences, and they consist of, say, listing the conditions that would make a society more resilient. And the absolute, they don't include any engineering stressor. So when we started looking at it, we said, okay, well, let's consider a certain attribute. For example, energy generation. And then you have an event that hit. And then the functionality would decrease. We know that if it is a 50-year event, then the recovery would be, it would take maybe 2 weeks, 1 month. If it is 100 years, it would be longer, 200 years. Then we start thinking like, well, maybe it would never recover to where it used to be before the event. But more importantly, in this slide, you could see that, well, it depends on the level of the event, of the stressor. If we say that a community is resilient, we need to define it to what stressor. Is it a 50-year storm or a 500-year storm? It cannot be done in the absolute. That's why we need the physical sciences to be involved in this, and that's why I enjoyed listening to the previous panel and the commissioner to say that we need to include all the sectors. I want to also mention something else here. To make a community more resilient, unfortunately, you might deviate from sustainability. Resilience requires actually redundancy. It requires that you have more resources than you actually need. So we have to have, there's going to be a balance then between when we say we need a society to be resilient and between making it sustainable. And I think the two of them, they don't match. So we cannot be 100% resilient and then 100% sustainable. So we developed this index, CIRI, Community Intrinsic Resilience Index. We didn't try to copy anyone, it emerged that way. And it includes information from 4 sectors: transportation, energy, health, and socioeconomic. And in terms of the energy, the commissioner just mentioned about the microgrids. And these are ideas we discussed with Dr. Shihab Kuran, CEO of Power Edison. So yes, I mean, having, for example, microgrids would make your system more resilient. Having different routes, different roads, that will make it more resilient in terms of transportation. I'm going to keep going. So we combine the 4 sectors, and then you could obtain you could assign then a weight. You say this city, this area, this county is actually resilient, and this is the resilience index. So I would like us to move away, as an academician, to move away from just qualitative descriptions. We need numbers for decision makers to rely on them to make these decisions. This is just work in progress, and I know some counties will complain why they didn't get high scores or not. But the idea is that you could look, for example, transportation. You could say Bergen County has high, transportation resilience. Well, Bergen County is, it's pretty rich county. So, but you could consider other counties, and then you can see that they might be great, for example, in health, but they are not doing that well in socioeconomic. So it means that maybe you don't want to spend resources there building hospitals. Maybe you want to put more effort on strengthening the weave and the socioeconomic conditions. And to go back, one more slide. Yeah. This one?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the one before the last. But because also, as Dr. Bouzet said, that the disasters or the conditions, they not depend only on the political entity, we developed the GIS tool. Well, first, it's easy. But also, second, you can delineate the area that you are interested in. Let's say, if we take Newark, if you have a major hurricane, the Port of Newark is going to be impacted, so it might be less resilient, but University Heights might not be impacted. So we need to go also beyond the political boundaries and then determine geographic areas that could be less or more resilient. Next one. The last one is we are now working with stakeholders to validate the model by comparison to historic events. We are also conducting surveys. And one of the main things we want to do is to figure out how resilient we are currently. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now switching gear a little bit towards bringing the innovative solution to the market, and Shannon is the next one.
That works.
Oh, you have.
Can I get the pointer?
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity to share my perspective on climate change. In particular, I will talk about ecosystem response.
A little bit closer to you.
Just bend.
Yeah. Okay.
Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay. In particular, I will talk about ecosystem resilience in the context of changing climate. Let's see if this works. The green one. So in this diagram, it shows the projected carbon dioxide emission towards end of the century. Different lines represent different business scenarios. There are obviously differences among the different scenarios, but overall, we would very likely to see an increase in the carbon dioxide. Along with increase in CO2, because of the well-known greenhouse gas effect, we're also very likely to see an increase in temperature. It's not just the elevated CO2 and temperature. There's more factors that we might encounter. So we might see increased atmospheric dryness. We might see more frequent and severe drought. We might see more severe or frequent wildfire, as well as insect outbreaks. So when we think about climate change, there's really multiple dimensions having a role to play. And we are actually already seeing the impacts, the negative impacts of climate change on ecosystem. There have been a wide reported forest mortality caused by drought, by flooding, by wildfire, and bark beetle attacks. This last photo in the lower right corner is the one that I took when I visited one of my study sites during the middle of the summer. You notice that in the middle, in the far end, there's gray patches. Those are standing dead trees from bark beetle attacks. It was really dramatic to be in the woods at that time. So But unfortunately, we don't. We currently don't really have a good tool or reliable tool that can accurately predict how ecosystem might respond to climate variability. Part of this problem is that ecosystems are so complex. They involve the coupled, highly integrated interaction among climate, hydrology, carbon cycle, as well as vegetation dynamics. It's not just, so when we think about ecosystem sustainability, it's not just ecosystem function gets influenced, but also the various type of services that they provide to us humans, such as water resources, wood production, as well as feedbacks to climate change. So we really need to improve our predicting capacity of ecosystem response to climate variability. And here are some opportunities I personally see that are promising towards addressing this challenge. As Scott already mentioned from previous panel, we need better Earth system models. Earth system models are the type of model that simulate the temporal dynamics of the atmosphere, the ocean, and the land as an integrated system. They are probably the most reliable or sometimes people say only tool for us to use when we want to project future Earth response to climate change. So we really need to improve on this end. A second opportunity that I see is to leverage the long-term historic record. There's hundreds years of record in stream flow, tree ring data, and also decades of eddy covariance flex tower and the remote sensing imagery. Those are excellent data sets out there for us to generate some synthetic type of analysis to better understand how ecosystem has responded to the historic past, and then how we can better understand its future. A final opportunity that I see is to consider the continuum. So historically, ecosystem research, natural resource ecosystem researchers, they tend to focus on the upland. Upland ecosystems dominated by different plant functional types. But actually, we now need to think more about other type of ecosystems, such as urban environment, as well as coastal ecosystems, which I think New Jersey is at the ideal spot to leverage because of its geographic proximity. So that's all I have. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much. And now Wumi is going to highlight some of the nanotechnology-based solutions to address these issues. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to give a sense of what we see and the way we view sustainability. And one thing that I like to emphasize to begin with is the ability to define. When we talk about sustainability, it's important that we have that we're all on the same page. Because everyone is talking about sustainability. Sustainability, what does it really mean? It means different things to different people. And so we have to first of all define so we understand and find solutions. Two key words I want to emphasize today is decarbonization. What does it mean? And then, of course, nanotechnology. So let me first define environmental sustainability. This is a three-legged stool. You have the environment, you have the economy, and you also have the society. The United Nations Sustainable Development defines sustainability or sustainable development as any development that would allow the current society, the current people to meet their own needs. Why not? Don't prevent the future society from meeting theirs. That is the definition. However, environmental sustainability seeks to sort of a holistic framework where we would be able to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Economic and policy issues. The key driver for the climate change that we're seeing is energy development, energy. So in 2003, Smalley, appearing before Congress, gave us this top 10 issues for sustainable development in the next 50 years. What do we have on the number one is energy. What have we been talking about since morning is energy. And look, if you go down this list, what do you see there? What are we experiencing now? COVID-19. That was 2003. In the next 30, 40 years, we're still going to be talking about the same thing. So where is the solution? Sustainability hierarchy. Every society, whether in the low income category or even the top earning societies, we all are trying to achieve the same thing. If you look at the basic level, physiologically, you want clean air, clean water, clean food. That's all we're looking for, even if you're the lowest of the income category. But as you go up in the hierarchy of field, what do you have? You really are trying to achieve true sustainability. True sustainability, where we have peace, peace within yourself, peace with your neighbors, peace with the environment in which we live in. So, what is decarbonization? Decarbonization is a transformation. You're looking for an economic system in which you're trying to reduce the number of carbon, the amount of carbon. And as a chemist, I want to focus on this from the perspective of chemistry. Because everything we're talking about, at the end of the day, we want to be able to minimize the exposure. We want to minimize the amount of the greenhouse gases that we're releasing. But where is the role of chemistry here? Don't forget that at the very key, the fundamental generation of the energy itself is the transformation of chemicals. So what you're seeing on this slide is just what is being done in order to capture carbon. There are two main approaches. One is to utilize carbon, and the other is to sequester carbon. To sequester carbon is very expensive, but we want to be able to use it. How about using carbon to make chemicals, to make as feedstock for everything we're making, pharmaceuticals, everything. And what you see on this screen is really what's being done right now, absorption. Sequestering, you have amine-based methods where ethanol amines and things have been reacted with carbon dioxide to basically capture it, to use it as feedstock. There are methods where you're having alkaline solutions. Some of these are in commercial development, others are still in the lab scale. You have membrane technology, where you have inorganic, metal organic frameworks, covalent organic frameworks. These are very good to capture carbon dioxide, but they're very expensive. They're not necessarily even at the commercial stage now, but they're still available. Okay, we have adsorption. Again, you have zeolites, you have nanotechnology, you have carbon nanotubes, you have graphenes at different levels of development. So, I told you, I said two keywords, decarbonization and nanotechnology. So why is nano key? Why is it important in terms of global warming or climate change? The reason is because the dimensional scale for the physical phenomena that are needed to save, to capture, to convert, to store, to transmit, to dissipate energy is inherently nano. It's inherently nano. I'll give you specific, just 4 examples. In the exotron dimensions, all of the solar panels, photovoltaics, nano. Photocatalytic methods, reaction under different conditions, nano. Transformation of energy at the nanoscale, and even for band gap engineering at the nanoscale. These are all, it's using nanotechnology to address them. Now, what have we done? What is my personal involvement in this field. Exactly 10 years ago, I co-founded an organization called the Sustainable Nanotechnology Organization. I was not looking to start any organization. In fact, all I did in 2011 was to start a conference, the Environmental Nanotechnology Gordon Research Conference. And at that conference, people decided, look, what are we going to do? Do we just have a meeting and go home? Do we start a journal or do we start an organization? And I was hesitant to do this. But because I was the chair of that conference, I was told, well, why don't you get this started? I said, well, let's see. Let's speak with people. Let's bring people together. I did a survey. More than 80% of the people said, this is what we want. There's a need for an organization of this sort. And so I co-founded the Sustainable Nanotechnology. We just celebrated our 10 years anniversary. For 10 years, we've been funded by the National Science Foundation to bring people together to discuss the sustainable development of nanotechnology in different forms. We have the stakeholders from the government, we have stakeholders from academia, we have people from industry, and everybody come together in November. We just finished our meeting last week, 3 days meeting. So in my lab, in my own research, I have been involved in the development of greener plastics, using greener chemistry to move away from the petrochemicals to make polymers. We're using flavonoids. We're using ethanol. We're using non-petrochemical based to make polymers. And in fact, I've talked about sustainable nanotechnology. If you're interested, please take a look at www.sosnano.org. And you see everything that we're involved there. I'm going to move back a little. There's one of my greener plastics. This technology itself, we just got another patent this August, this month. Oh, well, it's November now. Yeah, it was in August 17 that it was approved. That is literally a green plastic. But really, what it is using chemical formulations that will not require petrochemicals, that will utilize less carbon dioxide. That apple that you're seeing in that bag was there for 18 months, and it did not degrade. This technology is now we're discussing now with PepsiCo to take this into the market. And there are other things that we've done. So I think I have my time.
Yeah.
But basically, this is the takeaway. Let's define what we're talking about. Let's make sure that we're on the same page as far as description is concerned. Let's involve everybody. Let's bring them together. For example, there is nowhere in this country where you're getting a PhD in chemistry and you're required to know anything about the toxicity or the environmental impact of the chemicals you're making. We need to think about not just to bring people together, but the pedagogy, the training that we're giving to people. How is it that they understand what this thing is involved? So we need to know. So take-home message, decarbonization, using new technology, new feedstocks, moving away from petrochemicals, using carbon dioxide to achieve new objectives, and the use of nanotechnology. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you so much for all the 4 wonderful presentations that shed light on how to bring the innovative solutions to the user domain in terms of the sustainability versus resiliency. I think that was, the great point over there, that where we need to find the balance and how do you look into. We also heard about the transformational changes of net zero vehicles. This is going to change the landscape of how we bring the the decarbonization or the other initiatives in order to create a sustainable environment. We have very little time, but we could entertain one or two short questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got a question on, I have a lot of questions, but question on resilience. And I know one of the time we were trying to figure out what is the cost of resilience, and people said whatever the people are willing to pay. And probably people don't want to pay that much for resilience because it's a 50-year event, 100-year event. Why should I pay that kind of money? We found that out after Hurricane Sandy. We had a lot of challenges with that. But when you look at I know you're looking at the county by county and a different type of resilience index for those counties. But when you look at the infrastructure, right, were you able to look at the infrastructure and what is the resilience of that infrastructure? I give you an example. When they were trying to build a CHP in Hoboken, right, and it is building at the same ground level. And the reason you're building CHPs there is that you want to have resilience. And if it is getting flooded, will your CHP not get flooded? And so when you look at a lot of the infrastructure, they are in areas where they can get flooded, and there is no master plan. We have a state master plan, but they're not looking at all the critical aspects, why that infrastructure is that level. Of course, it's expensive to raise it to 9 feet above the ground. It's going to cost a lot of money. But we should be locating these assets strategically in different parts. And what is the resilience for that?
Yeah. No, sure. That is really a great point. I mean, there are many ways we can address this issue, but I just to make it simple for us here, it has to do with how much we go from the normal operation. So in our approach, when we compute resilience, we don't go and compute it just independent of an event. So to answer your question, that yes, if that area is flooded, then your resilience, essentially, the decrease in functionality and is going to be much higher. So I think we need to consider that into account. When we met with the Chief Resilience Officer, Dave Rosenblatt, I don't know if you, and that was one of the thing that he liked about our index, that actually it is a pre and post disaster index. So you don't want to say, look, before, for a 1 year event, we are 100% resilient, nothing happens. And then if we, have a 100-year event, then our resilience drops to 10%. So, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It is the other point that you mentioned, it's about stakeholders and buy-in. I think that's why it becomes also very important to conduct surveys to get people to say, look, this is what we are willing to put in the game, like to say, okay, we can tolerate a 100-year storm, but we don't want to tolerate a 10-year storm. But thank you. This is a very important issue to consider.
But I think this is a great question for governors and policymakers, that how to invest into the infrastructure support to create a balance between the sustainability and resilience. And I think this is very innovative that you put it, an index over there, CIRI index. So that should be, some kind of more data analytics, on that particular basis to tell us that there has to be some indicator to see that how those targets or how our progress is being made towards those targets.
Yeah, no, actually, tongue-in-cheek comment here, Michelle. Thank you for the comment, and I appreciate the question from Commissioner Shivkula as well. Our lack of sort of integration from data to policy and deployment is also helping us increase our resiliency as individuals, because the 100-year storm is not a 100-year storm anymore, right? So, I mean, I've lived in New Jersey for 2 decades, and I've consistently seen roads that have not been flooded now getting flooded almost every storm. Bridges that have not been closed. When I moved in 20 years ago, the same bridge used to be closed once in 6 years. Now it gets closed 6 times a year. So resiliency is also has got another connotation. So education, awareness of our citizens is going to be a huge thing, because I seriously think the gap between data, strategy, and policy deployment is still as wide as the Amazon. I mean, we're talking about this here, still the stuff doesn't, things get done. I mean, whether it's the coastal areas or internal. So I think we have to start getting the policymakers really educated yesterday, not tomorrow, right?
So
that's
that
something
goes
that we have
to
to do.
communication and the catalyst that we talked about, communication and education. But the third catalyst, which is also very, very critical in this particular area, is the equality and the socioeconomic, factorization of our society. Because whenever you talk about the resiliency, that cannot be, on the same scale into those socioeconomic challenge policy as they are on more privileged, factors of the society.
I thought weather doesn't look at geographic boundaries or
Yeah.
man-made nonsense, right? And we had 27 people or something died in Ida.
Right.
I mean, in Jersey. I mean, how unthinkable is this in 2021?
Yeah.
So anyway, we have more questions for
But the
panels.
issue is that how do we, address those socioeconomic disparities to invest into what is going to be resilient for those communities versus others, right? Any other take? The last question call. Okay, there you go. The last question. Do we have Dr. Ojkan join us? Dan?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, just one second. Okay, yeah, last question.
I'll try to keep it quick. It is related to what we were talking about at the very end there. It might be more a question for Pallavi. How do you sort of reconcile the fact that on one end, and this was discussed quite multiple times, you have individuals within low-income communities experiencing some of the most severe effects of climate change, while simultaneously they might also be the people that don't see immediate changes in their day-to-day as highest priority. How do you reconcile that, everything from sort of a policy perspective, but simultaneously a behavioral change perspective? Yeah.
Thank you. I'll do my best to do justice to that question. It's a loaded one. So there's something called the Office of Climate Action here that's led by Jane Cohen. It was essentially set up by the governor through an executive order to essentially understand some of the very challenges that you sort of just highlighted, which is one of many. One thing that we've learned and continues to be sort of a recurring message is that, communities that are at the receiving end of it aren't always the ones that also buy into it for a wide variety of reasons, right? One primarily sort of overarching response to that is that they don't see the benefits of investing in it. And I think to everybody, and when I say benefits can be qualified and quantified very differently for very different communities. So even through the NJIT program, a shore community has less traffic density. It has seasonal traffic. And so for shore communities to invest and businesses in shore communities to invest in buying zero-emission vehicles is a very different economic factor and a reason to invest in it versus somebody who is a business situated in the greater Newark. Because greater Newark is much more obvious. It sort of hits you in the face when you land and you see trucks. And in fact, if you just drive behind the airport, for example, you have landfills piled up with like garbage, metal garbage from vehicles that have just been crashed and just left there. So I think how it impacts you is very much at the core of why some communities decide to jump on the bandwagon faster than the other. But I think where we have the opportunity, and that I think means it's a gap and therefore an opportunity for us to engage as policymakers, and this really has to do with both speaking directly to one criticism that we've received in some of the work that we've done is, look, you speak with representatives of communities, overburdened communities. I think that's helpful, but sometimes you don't speak with the participants that are part of these subgroups, right? So how do you go and engage with some of them is definitely a challenge statement that we are trying to address. That being said, I don't know that we necessarily have all the answers either. And I think for that, we're relying upon people like yourself, researchers, but also the private sector to help us better engage more effectively with the stakeholders on the ground in order to make more impactful policy decisions.
Thank you so much. I think that's an excellent note to converge to, that this is why we are here today, for developing collaborative synergies and multi-stakeholder partnerships. So I thank all the panels, and please join me in thanking them. Now to conclude this workshop and the forenoon session of today's event, this is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Mary Ojcan. Dr. Ojcan is professor of Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering and climate champion faculty at the University of California, Riverside. She would be joining us remotely. Dr. Ojcan is a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors and the National Academy of Engineering's Frontier of Engineering, and an alumna of Keck National Academy of Science. Dr. Ojcan completed his graduate studies at Stanford and at UC San Diego. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ojcan and requesting her to give some concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate for the invitation. Can you hear me well and see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think I am the only person between you and the lunch, so I am trying to keep this short and sweet for you. You are going to see some cartoons throughout my presentation, because one of my hobbies is making cartoons, so I would like to integrate them into my presentations. And thank you again for the invitation here. Just to give you who I am and what I do briefly, is that my lab is mainly focusing on the battery technologies, and all the way starting using from the nanoscale to multi-scale, and using renewable sources like biosources like mushroom or even beet sand and fossils to make battery materials, and then doing and manufacturing at different scales, both in the usable scales in our cell phones, and also testing scales, which is the coin cells. Besides that, all the way to industrial testing, so we take everything all the way to the real use conditions and test the battery technologies that we are developing at that stage. We have about 180 journal publications and 32 issued patents, and we have about 15 also still active ones. And this is just a glimpse of our battery lab showing where we do the manufacturing and then how we do the testing. And this is one of my cartoons that I did for showing the tipping point, and it's just kind of like having a difficulty making a balance between the money, the finance, and also the climate. So that's why I try to put this together. And if today we look at the Brazilian Amazon forest, they tipped actually now being a carbon sink to a carbon emitter because of severe deforestation. And since Arctic ice melted with the global warming, and usually the white color reflects the solar light back into the space, and it is kind of like a cooling effect to Earth, but because of losing the ice, the cooling effect also reduced. And about 90% of the heat from our fossil fuels are now absorbed in the ocean. And this is also a tipping point for severe weather events that we are experiencing. And about 25% of the carbon dioxide we are emitting also being absorbed by the ocean, which is pushing towards the more acidification of our oceans. And this is a major concern for the world economy, who are actually mainly using the seafood and for their economic growth. And COP26, this is what I would like to mention a bit, because just finished on November 12th. About 200 countries participated to this, and they wanted to kind of like check on the Paris Agreement, which was 1.5 degrees C by the end of the century. And so the outcome, if we want to summarize this, for the countries pledged to abandon the coal, and Australia, US, China, and India declined this. And the global methane pledge, they said that by emissions will be reduced 30%. And US and EU are leading this effort. And switch to renewables like solar and wind. Since morning we've been discussing about that. And they would like the two renewables to dominate by 2050. Away from the petrol and diesel, moving towards the electrification of the transportation, including the aircraft, is also one of the outcomes. Planting more trees, for restoration and deforestation ending by 2030, and decarbonize industry, simply capturing emissions at the source. So this is something I am going to talk about, and the previous speaker already mentioned about this nicely. And removing carbon dioxide from the air through direct air capture. This is something I am also going to mention later. And also supporting, of course, the developing nations for the adaptation through the climate crisis that they will be experiencing in the future. The rich countries pledged previously about $100 billion, and now US, EU, and UK recently provided about $8.5 billion to help the South Africa to phase out of the coal use. So let's look at one by one to these outcomes, the phasing out of coal. So how realistic is this? And actually, if we look at the graph that is shown here, the battery storage cost is going down, and also PV and offshore and onshore, basically electricity, wind and solar electricity is also going down. So we are at the pretty much like the cheapest level of energy sources from both solar and wind, which is around $44 per megawatt hour for solar, and then 50 for the wind. And if we look at the coal, it's around like 40 to 140. It does change depending on the location and how it's being used. So it is pretty comparable. And renewable sources, wind and solar, are doubling globally every 5.5 years within the last 15 years. So this is actually wonderful. It is slow, but wonderful. And this means that 50% of the electricity could be actually from solar and wind by 2030. And this is, again, an estimate from the Bloomberg. But as we earlier discussed, and then the scenarios for the New Jersey, the energy is supplied from the natural gas, 80% and 20% from the oil. Definitely, there needs to be some thinking here, in a local space. And innovation box, if we look and see what the needs are, how to pull the solar and wind cost even further down. As an engineer, I see that the perovskite solar cells are quite promising, and their efficiency is 28% demonstrated in the lab. And what is needed here, that a full encapsulation of the devices to protect them from the external degradation, such as ambient moisture and UV. So the innovations actually can be made in this. And wind, the simulators for wind farms and modeling, better control tools, they can increase the output 4 to 5%, which is actually quite a bit. And so there is a need in the better control, turbine controls be developed. At the grid side, grid interface, we need a better controllable grid interface system to minimize the disturbances on the electric power system, such as wind and solar, when the wind is not there and then the sun is not there. So there has to be a better controlling systems. And another outcome was lowering the carbon emissions and carbon capture. So I am fan of actually carbon capture at the source. So what are the sources today? If we look at one by one, one of them, as you see here, is the ammonia and corn ethanol plants. If you look at their exhaust pipes, the gas that is coming out, 80% is carbon dioxide. And today's carbon capture cost of this at the source is around like $10 per ton. And the second one is, which is about like 3.7 gigatons of carbon dioxide emitted in 2019, is coming from the steel industry. The steel industry, it's difficult to avoid carbon emissions, and again, they are a major contributor to carbon dioxide. And the cost of basically capturing the carbon is anywhere between $10 to $60 per ton. And we are coming back to natural gas or coal-fired power plants, and their exhaust contributes about 15% carbon dioxide. But if you look at just last year, 4 gigaton of carbon dioxide is emitted, from in 2019. So that's a major contributor. And if we were to do carbon capture at the source, so the cost is around like $60 per ton. But there are some emissions that cannot be avoided and distributed emissions such as transportation, aviation, and even also some of the steel plants and construction plants are difficult to do the carbon capture at the source. So we have to somehow offset those emissions, and a technology that now today is available, capturing the carbon dioxide from the air. And this is called direct air capture, and looking at that at very, very low pressures of carbon dioxide, we are trying to capture the carbon dioxide from that directly from the atmosphere. And of course, that reflects to the cost of the capture, which is around $200 to $600 per ton. And today, many discussions about this, whether this is a way to go or just a way to, dismiss. And there are other negative emission technologies available for carbon removal. And I want to give you a perspective about the cost per ton carbon dioxide capture. And coastal blue carbon, of course, we just talked about this reforestation and forest management, agricultural practices, bioenergy carbon capture, and carbon mineralization. So here are the costs of per ton. If you look at it, they are not really bad, and except the direct air capture here. But of course, there are some limitations, and these are, for example, the coastal blue one requires a coastal access, and the afforestation or reforestation requires more land, and so on. But as engineers and then basically stakeholders, we can decide which one actually can be applied locally in the region that we live in. But these technologies are out there and available to be utilized. Just this month, I organized a discussion, a CAM Voices piece about the direct air capture and its scalability, and together with thought leaders in academia and industry, we discussed about the potential and feasibility of scalable direct air capture, and then we discussed about whether direct air capture is sustainable technology. And the people who participated to this, Carlos, who's the CEO of Climeworks, and this is one of the leading companies for the direct air capture in Europe. Marcia McNutt, she's the president of National Academy of Sciences. Myself, Eda, she is the CEO of CarbFix. Elliott, he is also another fellow of National Academy of Inventors from the Louisiana State University. And Paul Sandberg, he is the president of National Academy Inventors. Suchi and Jennifer, they are from the Department of Energy. So I recommend you to look at and see different views about the scalable direct air capture technology. So let's look at the sustainable societies, because this is what we've been discussing since morning, and I would like to talk about 2 points here. And one of the outcomes from the COP26 is to establish a Pacific Coast collaborative task force about the low carbon construction. And California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles, they are already within this task force. And what they are looking into is developing a low carbon material for construction, such as cement and then the steel and other materials. If you look at the building's perspective, if energy use of a building, the emissions is about like 39% carbon emissions, and 28% is coming from the energy operation, and 11% is coming from the embodied carbon, which is the material that is used to build the building. And so this is something ongoing and needs some attention, I think, nationwide. A second one is a potential further innovations required, and this is about the cooling, air conditioning. 7% of greenhouse gas emissions produced by cooling, and global warming, of course, requires an installation of more ACs. And more ACs means that more carbon dioxide emission. And AC also uses hydrofluorocarbons, HRCs, as a cooling medium, and they have tendency to leak into the atmosphere where they are thousands of times more potent at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. So today we have about 2 billion AC units around the world, and by 2050, 2/3 of the world's households, they are expecting to have air conditioning because of the global warming. And this means that the emissions most likely will rise by 90%. So there is a huge need about the development of energy efficient and climate friendly way of cooling, new technologies. SkyCool is one of the companies. They are trying to use the atmosphere cooling on the rooftops. Some others painting the roofs with white color to reflect the sunlight. But definitely we need innovation on building design, passive cooling integration, green architecture integration, scalable and deployable cooling systems, sustainable cooling, using plants as part of the cooling, and also removal of carbon dioxide. And another outcome of COP26 was about the climate change and sustainability education. And they raised an urgency of embedding climate considerations into all levels of education. I think this is very important. This is really important for the generations to come to increase the awareness about what is expected in the future, and establishing new departments, programs, and centers, and institutes, and so on. And my cartoon is trying to show the establishment of a school of sustainability, and then different colors of bricks representing different pillars like economy, finance, social impact, policy, technology, and materials, all integrated into this. And if we go back to 70 years before, Edward Teller actually.
Dr.
Yes.
Osgen, we have the next agenda, so we are running out of time. I'm so sorry.
Almost done. Yeah, almost done. Almost done. And he actually said that the negative impacts of carbon dioxide, and then this was before the moon landing and Beatles and so on. And Exxon, actually, one of their internal climate change report just faced up. 50 years ago, they knew about the impacts of carbon dioxide emitted from the fossil fuel and global warming. And so that's why it brings to more political box that now COP26 is talking about phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. And what I would like to finish is that as humans, so this is just showing that we have a disproportionately large impact on our environment. And it's showing the weight of living things, which around like 550 gigatons on Earth. 450 is from the plants, 70 from the bacteria, and 2 gigatons are the animals, and 0.06 gigaton is the humans. So we have a lot to say, and we are impacting the entire world. So we need to be very responsible. And with that, I know that you are trying to cut the cord, but I really appreciate for the invitation, and then I really enjoyed all the conversations since morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. I'm so grateful for your time and speaking to us with very informative and excellent talk. I think these are very, very important points, and the data that you presented that have to be taken into our considerations for looking into the next generation of the innovative solutions and bringing them to sustain our environment. If there is one quick question, I would like to. Yeah.
Can you make sure the slides are available to people who attended, so it's great information to share?
Yes, this is actually, the session is being recorded on the YouTube over there, so we are going to put those recordings on the website. Yeah, okay, so there is one question there.
Quick question, I think. Yeah, you mentioned about steel being polluting industry, but
Right.
Princeton put out numbers on concrete. Concrete emits
Right.
4 billion tons, and
Yeah.
and we know this for a long, long time. And
Exactly.
why are we not doing something about it?
Yeah, because it costs, right? So for the technology implementing carbon capture, it does cost to the industry. So that's why, because there are no regulations, and today there is carbon pricing, and they are trying to implement cap and trade type of new finance methods where a big emitters has to pay for it, and otherwise they had to implement this carbon capture technology. Since there wasn't any, I would say, policies placed to prevent and then reduce the amount, and there was no cap for the limiting of carbon dioxide emissions. And now this is what CAP, 26 was talking about, putting a cap to industry and then make them accountable or for integration of the carbon capture technologies, because the technologies are there, but of course it costs.
Okay, one last question, yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I thought that the information on the capture, the data you presented on the capture is quite significant. And I'm wondering if you can comment on either capture or utilization, carbon capture versus carbon utilization. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, carbon capture, even this direct air capture, which is the expensive technology, when they capture the carbon dioxide, they do two things. Either they do basically store under the earth, or they sell to different industries. And some of them, for example, for drink industries, making Coke and so on. And some of them are even for concrete industry. And the scary part is that the major customer is the oil companies. And this carbon dioxide that is captured back by the oil companies, and to utilize actually for heavy duty, difficult to surface oils and from the beneath the earth. And because carbon dioxide reduces the viscosity of this basically places that they tap, and it makes it easier to surface the oil. So that's kind of like a catchy gray area that requires attention, because they are using carbon dioxide to create more carbon dioxide. So there has to be some kind of like a regulation, and this needs to be known by I think the policymakers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ozgan. I'm so very grateful for your time and outstanding visionary presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Have a great, wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the presenters and the panelists today that you have brought different aspects on the spectrum of the sustainable societies with respect to the climate change. So I just wanted to let you know that the next workshop, as I mentioned in the beginning of the introductory remark, is going to be in healthcare, and the date is February 21st. And our distinguished keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Roderick Pettigrew. Oh, yeah. No, we don't want to go back in time. Thank you for spotting that out. It's February 21st, 2022. So that shows that how tired I got at the end of the, putting all those things together. So Dr. Roderick Pettigrew is one of the few global leaders who have the honor of being the member of all the three academies, the Academy of Science, Academy of Engineering, and Academy of Medicine. So he and I have worked together for about 15 years on the Point of Care Initiative, and he was the founding director of the National Institutes of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, so he would be with us. I would also like to thank, can we do the next slide? To thank all the speakers and distinguished guests and Commissioner Chivikola joining us today, Karen Reef, Gobi Rao, Judith Sheft, Robin Lichenko, Scott McKay, Ali Bauzid, Pallavi, Mother Kirksira, Shannon and Wumi and Dr. Mary Ajkan. And also, I would like to, can you put next one there? Yeah. Many thanks to the Media Services and Strategic Communications Office, and specifically the people from the Office of Research, Kathleen and Surabhi, who have been working up front and have been working relentlessly in putting all the logistics together. I'll also like to thank DiCaprio family for sponsoring the President Forum. Let's take a 15 minutes break. I'm so sorry about the delay, but we had such a wonderful presentations that it was hard to stop in between. Let's pick up the lunch and come back to the tables where you are sitting. So we are going to be having a working lunch with faculty presentations starting at 1:15. Thank you so much.